The Industry 45 show, the best show on earth right here at Giant TV. Shane Christopher Neal with Danno O'Shea, which I'm really excited for this because we're going to talk about the music business. This episode, Industry 45, brought to you by Krown Rust Control, 4790 Montrose Road, Niagara Falls. Krown Rust Control, Niagara Falls here in Ontario, Canada, in case you're watching around the world, because you can watch us anywhere.
Lovely.
So let's go with this. You're a drummer. You are the band leader and the brains and the brawn behind the power that is My Son the Hurricane. So let's talk about you. I know it's a big title, but let's talk about you as a drummer and how you got started with Hurricane real quick.
Certainly. I've been drumming for a lot of people for years, and I was a touring drummer, a hired gun, if you would, for a long time. And then I started Hurricane as the band that I always wanted to start, like as being a sideman. You don't often get to play the music that you love. And I was I heard some New Orleans style music, and that was something that I wanted to recreate. So I created Hurricane, not with the idea that it would ever be my full-time gig. And now it has consumed my life in a good way.
So if people don't know, Hurricane is not a three-piece band.
No, we tour with, it's kind of a revolving door of characters, but on the small end, 10-piece, on the high end, 13 or 14 with a bunch of techs. So when we roll into a venue, it's really like a gang is coming in. We're loud and proud. Lots of horns.
So when you put this together and you were looking at booking your band and promoting your band, there were a lot of things to think about within this, quote, music business. And you are kind enough now to travel around the province of Ontario and give lectures on the music business, all I think sponsored by Long and McQuaid.
Yeah, a few of them are, yep.
And so let's talk about that. So number one, why did you decide to kind of go out and educate the young musicians and get them to understand a little bit more about the music business today?
I think that a lot of people had been coming to me saying that if a band of that size that likely shouldn't make a lot of sense or money or tour the way we do, that we must be doing something right. I fell ass backwards into the speaking thing where I basically had a friend who had asked me to speak to a few of his clients. He ran a recording studio. And so I put on an event, and then that sold out. And then there was more and more people who were hungry for this knowledge. And so I created what I think is a pretty funny PowerPoint full of memes and toured around with it. And it's since kind of caught fire as well, which is nice because as an agent, which is like my other gig, in the wintertime, you starve because you don't actually get paid until the shows happen for the bands that you book. So, Hurricane being my main band and these other acts, it's tough. So anything to keep me from working at Subway for the winter is wonderful.
So I'm going to throw out a phrase to you that will lead us further into this. And I'm not saying this is an accurate phrase, that it's right or that it's wrong. You can't make money in music anymore. So when I say that, some people might say, you know what, I play in a local band, I make $150 a week, I'm making money. That's great. And some people can tour the world and make millions. So in that statement, can you make money today in music as a full-time musician? You do it, but maybe you can kind of elaborate on that.
Right. Well, it's changed, right? The model in the last 20 years has totally been turned upside down. When I was younger, everyone was looking for the label. We all wanted to be on the record label. And Much Music was still, playing videos that cost $100,000, which is crazy. And so now, there have been some serious advances in music in terms of getting your music to people. And I look at it as a really good thing. It's different. If you used to be on a label, there would be bigger advances and things like that. But it was harder for the little guy. And I think now there are a lot of advantages for the little guy. So whereas you probably wouldn't make the same amount of money on CD sales because that's not as much of a thing anymore, there's a lot of revenue out there that people don't know. And so for me, yes, I think it's great. I think it's got to be a mix of performing and merchandise and royalties And and things like streaming, everyone just focuses on streaming, right? They're angry. The streaming is
not paying them money,
not paying them very well at all. But my go-to response to that is that if in the 90s, which a lot of us look at it as kind of a heyday for like great music being made, if I had been able to tell people that my music could be in anyone's pocket at any time, it would be amazing. And what would that be worth? It would be worth everything. And now you can just have that. It's incredible. So yes, Spotify, when I look at my year end, Spotify pays me like 0.1% of what I make in the year, but it's really helpful to me. Also, things like Spotify offer things like playlisting, which gets you to,
a different pay level, or
no, just they don't. It's the same pay level, but it gets you to new ears, and it also. The thing that I really love about Spotify that I don't think that a lot of bands are considering is that it offers things like analytics. So, you get to really find out where your crowd is. And I use that as an agent to sell bands all the time. I said, you realize that you have like really strong Alberta numbers. Let's get you there. And that's the kind of thing that people aren't looking into.
Well, because they're not typically business people, right? Yeah. And you are, and lucky for you. So if I'm a young artist, and it doesn't matter how old I am, but I'm an artist that's new into the game.
Yeah.
Who should I contact to help me out? Let's talk about, like, do you get yourself a manager right away? I mean, first you have to have a good song and you have to have a good production and all that stuff. But like beyond that, what's the first step for me to find success if I'm not a good business person?
Right. And again, how things have changed. What's really neat is before you needed the album. And now we have these SoundCloud guys who get like 20 million streams. It's incredible. So I always say, yeah, of course, the song, like have your great song, even if you just have one, yeah, there's a lot of people. It's really still the DIY, do it yourself ethos, where you can do a lot of this stuff, whether it comes to booking and it comes to releasing music on your social media. Like, you can promote yourself in a way you never could before. In a lot of ways, this has really leveled the playing field. Whereas before, a few bands were selected and huge money was thrown at them. And, that brought them to, a different echelon. Whereas now that's not the case. So things like managers and, I always tell bands that you'll know when the vultures are swarming. That means you're doing well. We have vultures everywhere.
Dude, I was going to say, do people call you and say, Danno, I can make something happen for you?
Oh, yeah. All the time. And I mean, in the same way that there's a lot of bands who I think contact me thinking that I will change their lives.
Right.
And that, my label, which is, Vegas Funeral Records, which basically exists as, as the business end of My Son the Hurricane and my agent work, that they think that that's going to, I could shoot them into stardom. I said, well, I just, pay my mortgage.
What about, earlier on we were talking about, or I brought up the song itself. So how important is it for the artist to make sure they get good production, because sometimes people say, I'm just going to do it in my basement. I'm going to see, it's good enough. Let's get it out there. Or is it important to go to a good producer and get a good mix on it? And, where do you see that? Because today people listen to things everywhere and they don't always sound like the best quality, but they go, you know what? I really like that song. And then,
yeah. And that's tough too, because that's, up to the listener, I think. I know that guys like Avicii started in their basement, and that amazes me, so I am still a fan of the big studio, but I also understand why people don't do it. It's expensive, and there's a lot that goes into this, whereas some people can record at home and mix at home and then maybe send it away for mastering, and that costs 1/20th the price.
Right.
I can understand that, and if you want to use that maybe to shop things around, sure. If you're looking to get on the radio, there's a certain quality level that's expected.
How important is radio?
Well,
And it's okay because you're sitting here, but how important is radio in the big picture for an artist?
As a person sitting in a radio station, I'll tell you that it isn't as important as it once was.
Right.
Before you had to break on radio, whereas now, something that, like I was talking about these, I went to see an artist, and I forget his name, a few weeks back at Juno Fest, and he had something like 15 million streams. And, that blew my mind because, I'm obviously a lot older than he is, but I love that can exist now. Whereas, there's so much music trying to fit in this little space that's radio. Like radio has a lot of people to appease, and it makes sense, right? And it's got to paint in broad strokes. Now, I can find the strangest thing on my phone in 2 seconds, whatever is bizarre subgenre, and I love subgenres. And I was just meeting with a fella from town, Cam Schwartz, and he has a DVD coming out from this one really strange kind of like metal subgenre, and it's doing very, very, very well. And I think, wow, what an amazing thing that these subgenres can really grow now, because radio isn't the be all end all that it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to have my name on a Katy Perry song. That would change things.
I like to be the host of a radio show too.
Neat. Yeah.